I want to talk today about the subject of bitting gaited horses. Actually, we're talking about the subject of bitting horses in general because there's nothing that we do with our gaited horses that doesn't apply equally to non-gaited horses and vice versa. We have this mindset regarding gaited horses that they're some kind of alien creature that have to be bitted differently and saddled differently and shoed differently, and I'm hoping that we can dispel some of those myths so that we can take our horses and make them more the horses that they were designed to be by God and nature. And so the subject we're going to talk about first is bitting, because unless you have a horse comfortable in its bit, you're not going to have a horse that is relaxed and happy and functioning as well and as highly as he can and should. A lot of times the best way to deal with bitting and the right way to bit is to show some of the things that we do that are wrong. There are two kinds of bits. Most people already understand that. Some of us don't, though. A lot of people would call this bit a snaffle bit. A lot of people would call this bit a snaffle bit because they have broken mouthpieces. However, they're not snaffle bits. These are curb bits because they have leverage. A true snaffle bit is a bit that works directly off the rein or directly off the rider's hand. There's no kind of curb or shank to apply leverage to the bit. A lot of people would tell you that this snaffle bit, this nice simple snaffle bit, and it comes in a number of different styles. You can have a D-ring snaffle, O-ring snaffle. This is a full cheek snaffle. This prevents the snaffle from being pulled through the horse's mouth. A lot of people would say that a snaffle is a kinder and gentler bit. But I'd like to propose that perhaps the snaffle is not necessarily a kinder bit than a good curb bit. Now, we talked about the snaffle working off of direct pressure. And right off of the rein, right off of the rider's hand, direct pressure. Now, for a young horse, that can be very important. For a horse that's been developed and that you want to develop fully, especially, I will say, for gaited horses, because we need that horse to work up off the bit, and we'll explain that a little later in the video. A curb bit, a well-designed curb bit, is actually the best way to go. Now, this happens to be our bit, and I'm going to show you how a well-designed curb bit should work. And I'm going to ask for an assistant from the audience to give me a hand with that. Would you come up, Barb, and help me with this? Barb, if you would hold both of your hands out, and we'll pretend that this is the pole, the horse's pole. And this is the way the bit is attached to the horse. Now, I want you to watch her hand when I pull on the rein. That's the horse's pole. Most of us don't realize that when you pull on the rein of a good curb bit, the first thing that happens is that you're notifying the horse at the pole, which tells him to lower his head and prepare for another action. The next action that happens is that the curb chain down here, which is under the horse's chin, comes up under the chin groove and asks him to tuck. And the third thing that happens is the mouthpiece takes. So you have three actions taking place. You have lower, tuck, and take. And because there are three actions like that, progressive actions when the bit is properly proportioned and designed, your horse has an idea about what's coming. He can prepare and soften for the next request. Now, if I were to take a bit that wasn't as well designed, we would have a whole different action. Now, I'm going to bring you back in a few minutes, but first let's look at some of these other bits, and then I'll show you what the action is with them in a little more graphic way. So we've discussed the snaffle bit, which works off of direct pressure. And we've discussed the curb bit, which is essentially any kind of bit with a shank on it. We've discussed how the curb bit works. Now we're going to look at the different parts of the curb bit and talk about why they work, why they don't work, what's better, what's not so good. This is a common curb bit. It's called a tom thumb. A lot of people use this bit because they think that it's a very mild bit, and I often hear how their horses respond so well to it. Well, this bit, like I'm afraid to say most of the bits on the market today, work off a principle of pain avoidance. Now, that's not the best way to train a horse or anyone, horse, dog, human. You want to work off a principle of reward and willing cooperation. Now, this bit will work off of a pain avoidance principle, and here's why. When this bit is placed on a headstall, you have the headstall here and the chin strap here. When the rider pulls on the rein, several things happen. First of all, the center of the mouthpiece comes up with leverage, pokes the horse in the roof of the mouth. The bars of the mouthpiece collapse down across the tongue and bars of the horse's mouth. And then the chin strap comes up and you've literally placed your horse's mouth in a nutcracker. And so the reason horses work so well out of this bit is because the instant you touch the rein, they anticipate what you want, and they do it quickly so that they can avoid that nutcracker effect on their mouth. So they're working out of pain avoidance. And your horse can be very quick and smooth in a bit like this because they're going to act very quickly to avoid that pain. And a smart horse will, at least. We have another bit here. It's called a gag bit. Again, a lot of people will tell you that this is a really humane bit because it doesn't take much on the horse's mouth. But the problem with the gag bit is, remember we talked about the progression of the way a curb bit acts? First, when you take on the rein, the first thing that should happen is the horse is notified at the pole. Right after that, the chin strap should come up, and then the mouthpiece should take. Well, when you pull on this, they get an exaggerated action at the pole, and then almost nothing. They do get some chin strap action, so they're told to lower and tuck all at once. So you get a very tucked in horse, and then unless the horse tucks very hard, and that's what they say, this will give your horse a good headset. Unless your horse tucks very hard, which they will learn to do, remember the pain avoidance principle, this will come down. This also collapses across the horse's tongue. The chin strap, you do get a nutcracker effect, and this takes hold all at once. You've got this lower tuck, then nothing, and then all of a sudden the horse is just jerked back into the bit. And so they learn to do an exaggerated tuck in this kind of a bit. Now, we talked about how this bit works. I want to talk about the parts of the curb bit, so that as we're going through all of these other bits, you can see why parts are perhaps not proportioned the way they should be, or perhaps are more severe than they might appear to be. And in some cases, a bit that looks very severe is actually not severe at all, once you understand what each part does and how it acts in the horse's mouth. Now, horses are animals that resist direct pressure, just as people are. If you were to go up to someone and start tapping and shoving them, chances are they're going to start tapping and shoving you back. Same with a horse. Well, if you take a bit that is a direct pressure bit and you continue working in it, what you have is a direct pressure on the horse's mouth, and it tends to get them up-headed, stiff, and resistant. Now, there are some people in the world who can work any kind of horse, including a gaited horse, very well out of a snaffle bit. But it can take years to become that good, and years to really get your horse to working that well, and softening them up. On the other hand, a good curb bit works off of indirect pressure. And when we were talking about how there's progressive degrees of request. There's the take at the pole, which is the lower. There's the tuck under the chin, which is tuck. And then there's the take on the mouthpiece. Now, an analogy that some of us ladies can probably really identify with is how we might approach our husbands when we want a new horse. We probably aren't going to walk up to him and say, honey, guess what? I bought a $3,000 horse today. let's go bring him home. Chances are that kind of a direct approach is going to meet with some resistance, at least with some husbands that I know. And so what we tend to do is come at a subject indirectly. And what we'll do is go, gee, honey, I saw the nicest horse out in that field the other day. What would you like for dinner? Would you like your spaghetti tonight, your favorite dinner? And we come at it indirectly. We begin to prepare him for what we're going to request. That's what we want to do with the horse. Now, the way the bit is designed determines whether that will happen. Now, on this bit, I'm going to take another one just so that we don't get confused. We'll take this one. On this bit, the upper part of the shank above the mouthpiece is called the purchase. The lower part is called the shank. This is called the cheek piece. This is the mouthpiece. And of course, when it's on the head stall, you also have a chin strap here, which you need to always ride with a chin strap on a curb bit. A lot of people say, I have to ask you a dumb question. Should I have a curb strap on this? That is not a dumb question at all. Another question we get often is, where do we attach it? Do we attach it here, or do we attach the chin strap here at the upper? You always attach it on the upper part of on the upper rings of the bit. Now, if your bit is well proportioned, we'll take this one because it is, the purchase should be approximately 1/2 the length of the lower shank. And the reason for that is that when you take on the bit, how fast that purchase notifies the horse in relation to how quickly the chin strap comes up. Remember, we want that 1, 2, 3 progression. With a purchase that is approximately half the length of the lower shank, you get that 1, 2, 3 progression. Now, I hear people often saying, well, you know, if I'm going to buy a curb bit, I want a little colt starting bit, and they don't have much of a shank. We have what's called a colt starting bit here. Now, you'll notice here that the purchase is almost the same length as the shank. Now, people will say that's a really nice, easy, tactful bit because, you know, there's not much shank. No, that's not true. If the purchase and the shank are too close in length, too nearly identical in length, then what happens when you take on the rein is that everything takes hold at one time. The horse gets grabbed at the pole, the chin strap comes up, and the mouthpiece takes hold all at the same time. Now, I'm going to ask Barb if I can use her and abuse her for a minute. We're going to say that Barb is a friend of mine, and I want to say something to her, and her back is to me. And you remember, we're on the top of a horse. The back of their head is to us. They don't see us motioning with our hands or anything like that. So they're ahead of us. Now, I want to talk to my friend. So the best thing for me to do at first is just to touch her on the shoulder to notify her that I want to say something to her, to prepare her for me to say something to her. And then I'm going to perhaps turn her slightly like this to get her attention. And then I'm going to say, would you step forward, please, Barb? That was equivalent to the lower tuck and take that we're talking about with the curved bit. Now, let's say that I have a bit that is very close in proportion, lower and upper shank, the purchase to the lower shank. It would be equivalent to my being like this and my grabbing hold of her and going, here, I want you to go over here. Here, I want you to go over here. Now, your horse will eventually respond to that because, thank you, Barb, I'm going to abuse you more later. Your horse will eventually respond to that because of the pain avoidance principle. It's painful to get grabbed and yanked around. And so the instant they feel anything, they'll quickly respond. But they're not softening, bending, and giving you their willing cooperation. They're simply trying to avoid discomfort. I don't think there's been anything invented in the horse world that's been more useless and even counterproductive than a bit with a solid mouthpiece and loose cheeks. And the reason for this is that the loose cheek encourages riders to use this as though it were a direct rein bit. And they'll pull on one rein to turn their horse around or whatever when they're trying to cue their horse. They'll ride as though it's a snaffle. It's a foolish idea, because when you have this in the horse's mouth, you have the chin strap below the horse's chin. You pull on one rein and it just twists the bit up. This comes up and hits the horse in the side of the face. It twists the bit up. Everything gets pulled out of position, and really all you're doing is brute forcing your horse around. It's like trying to drive a car with power steering when the power steering has gone off. It can be done, but it's really a silly idea. On the other hand, we have bits, and I for a while thought it was a really good idea to use bits that are three-piece like this with independent action from side to side. And actually it is a real good idea. The problem with a bit that has a roller like this, or broken mouthpiece like this, remember, if you have a broken mouthpiece with a curb, what you're going to get is that nutcracker effect. So we never encourage riders ever. If you have these kind of bits, hang them on your wall for decoration, but don't put them in your horse's mouth. If it has a two-piece mouthpiece and shanks, get it out of your horse's mouth. You're causing him a lot of discomfort. What we have here is a curb bit with a three-piece mouthpiece, which does allow the rider to use a leading rein from time to time, which is nice. A leading rein can be used nicely to soften and supple and bend your horse. However, when you have any kind of breakdown in the mouthpiece like this, what you have is a potential, a very strong potential to pinch. Now, if he can zoom in on this, it doesn't take much take before her skin gets pinched. Now, I'm being very careful because I've bruised people, and Sue's too valuable a friend to bruise. But what you have is not only the potential, but almost a certainty at some point or another your horse is going to be pinched in the tongue. What happens then is the horse learns not to give himself to the bit. Now, if you've ever had your hair cut and a hairdresser's cut your ear by mistake, you know every single time that hairdresser or any other ever gets near your ear, you tense up and start going like this. Well, that's what happens when you have a horse that's been pinched in the tongue by a bit at any time. Yes, they'll give themselves stiffly to it, but they're tense. And they'll try to avoid actually letting that tongue lay right into the bit, which is what you want. You want that horse to give itself to the bit. And if they're doing this and trying to avoid contact, then you're not going to have a good, soft, responsive, and willing horse. Now, we talked about snaffles perhaps not being as kind and gentle as people think. We talked about how direct pressure can create resistance in a horse. Here's the other problem with snaffles. You're already all bruised. I bruised her with the other one. If you can see this, when you take on this bit, there is a very, very, very strong pinching action. You definitely are going to pinch your horse's tongue. Now, I said earlier that you should still work out of a snaffle with a very young horse, and you should. But if you have a snaffle bit like this, what you want to do is put some duct tape across the joint in the middle to avoid any kind of pinching on your young horse. Another aspect that's important to consider when purchasing a bit is the shape and action of the mouthpiece in the horse's mouth. This is absolutely critical. Now, we talked about having a mouthpiece that's solid with loose cheeks. Not a good idea. We talked about having a mouthpiece that has a roller in the center. Could be a good idea, but if it breaks down, it's going to pinch. Not a good idea. What you want, another aspect that is most important is the mouthpiece on most bits lie flat across the horse's tongue. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. Horses' tongues are thick. When you put a bit in that lies flat across the tongue and contacts the bars on either side, you have really created strong pressure point right across the horse's mouth. Aside from that, the horse now can't swallow because a tongue has got to lift in order to swallow. Now, if my viewers will try that, go ahead, put your hand in your mouth, hold your tongue down, and try to swallow. You can't do that. Now, something we want our horses to do is to have a nice wet mouth, but you don't want them to have a nice wet mouth if they can't swallow. So what has been done in the past is to give a nice big barrel so that that can roll over the horse's tongue. That's fine, except that when you're pulling on the bit, but it still lies flat across the horse's tongue. What you want is a bit that offers your horse tongue relief, something that curves to allow room for the tongue. Well, we just happen to have a bit here that does that. But this is really important. I want you to take a good close look at this. That horse's tongue can go under there without any discomfort. We can move the horse laterally for softening and suppling. We have independent action side to side, but there's a copper roller in the center for salivation, and there's bushings to prevent it from breaking down and pinching. The ratio is nice. This is the purchase is half the length of the lower shank. This kind of bit is going to encourage your horse to go soft, supple, and comfortably. We have this so that the mouthpiece actually extends beyond the horse's lips, and this creates a couple of situations that are favorable. First of all, it totally eliminates the possibility of pinching at the corners of the horse's mouth. Now, a lot of us ride gaited horses, and I see a lot of people riding out there with bit guards. And that's a good idea if your horse's bit pinches, but why not get a bit that doesn't pinch the horse's mouth in the first place? When you ride with a bit guard, you've essentially placed something between yourself and the horse's lips, and you've lessened communication. When you pull on the rein of this bit, this curve here allows the bit to swivel and encourages the horse to lower, soften, and bend. And that's a good thing. And you're going to see through these videos a lot of horses moving absolutely beautifully because we ride them, put them in this bit right off the bat. I'm going to talk about some typical gaited horse bits. When I look at some of these, I think, I don't know why people created them, except that pain avoidance does work to train a horse. Now, this is a type of walking horse bit. This is a type of walking horse bit. Oh, Lord. This is a type of walking horse bit. This is a walking horse bit that's often used in field trials. Now, I'm going to talk, and we're going to talk about these one at a time. We already talked about this one having the single broken mouthpiece and it acting like a nutcracker. And with this really long shank, it is really a nutcracker. What we didn't talk about was the loose cheeks on this. There's no protection. It's going to shape the corner of the horse's mouth. Hang it on your wall. This bit has too short of a purchase for the length of the shank. The ratio of the purchase to the shank is all wrong in this bit. It's going to be very severe on the horse. This bit's going to pinch the horses at the corner of the mouth. The bar comes straight across the horse's tongue, so it's going to cut right in. The only saving grace about this is that the mouthpiece is nice and thick, and the thicker the mouthpiece, the less severe the action on the horse's tongue. You can liken it to a paper cut. Something very thin can really cut in, or you can liken it to a piece of wire. If it's very thin, it's going to cut in. If it's a thick cable, it's not going to cut in as badly. It's not enough of a saving grace. Hang it on the wall. This bit is commonly used with walking horses. It's used to establish their head nod and give them a good headset. Now, I want everyone to understand we don't work on a horse's headset. We don't work to help to establish the horse's head nod. The head nod comes out as an expression of the hind leg setting deeply under the horse as the walking horse strides and does an overstride. And if the head nod's coming out of any other thing, it's detrimental to the animal. Now, this particular torture device has a double twisted wire mouthpiece. The twisted mouthpiece abrades the horse's tongue and bars. It sensitizes. A trainer will tell you it sensitizes their mouth. What it does is it abrades it. My mouth would be sensitized also if it were raw from having something like this running across it all the time. The next thing this does, it's got a gag action on the side. In other words, this slides up and down on the side. It pinches the corner of the horse's mouth and causes problem there. The ratio of the purchase to the shank is bad. The purchase is much too low. More importantly, it acts as a nutcracker. When this comes down, every time the horse puts his head down, his head goes into a nutcracker. But watch what happens with the points of the mouthpiece. When the horse puts his head down, it hits him in the palate and causes him to flip his head up away from the pain avoidance principle again. But every time that horse flips his head up, he has the facsimile of a good Tennessee walking horse head nod. And that's why this bit is used. Don't even hang it on the wall. Break it into 65 different pieces and throw it in the garbage. And don't let anybody else check your garbage before it goes to the landfill. You don't want to ever take a chance on somebody taking it off the wall and putting it in a horse's mouth if you can help it. I'm not sure who invented this bit, but it may have been the Marquis de Sade. It's actually gone one step beyond the double twisted wire mouthpiece walking horse bit. I'm told it's used frequently for field trial horses. Why anyone would use a bit like this, I don't know. It has a straight across twisted mouthpiece to abrade the horse's tongue. It has a very severe gag action. The purchase is right above, well, it's above the mouthpiece, depending on where your mouthpiece is at any given time. It's absolutely a miserable bit. Again, this one should go in the landfill, not on your wall. This is a typical Peruvian bit. This one has a small spoon in the center. They almost all have spoons in the center. Most of them have a larger spoon in the center. To its credit, it does have rollers here for the horses to play with, and that's about the only thing I can find to its credit. It will pinch the horse here at the side with the loose cheek piece and the solid mouthpiece. The ratio of purchase to lower shank is not good. This comes right across the horse's tongue. When you put this in the horse's mouth, this is going to lay right across the tongue and hold his tongue down. It traps their tongue. Now, Peruvians are rather notorious, and you're going to see some in the video, for the way that they hold their head very proudly. But when you learn how to look at these horses discriminatingly, when you learn how to look at them in a way to see how they're actually functioning, what you'll see are these horses are going very stiff, very hard through the neck and poll. And that's largely because of the function of these kind of bits. Now, I said that a good gaited horse bit is a good bit, period. And that's the truth. All you need is a good bit. This is a twisted wire curb, not a snaffle, because it's got shanks on it. It's a twisted wire curb bit. It'll have the nutcracker effect, more dangerously so, because it's going to abrade the tongue in bars, and then it's going to come down like a nutcracker on those tender membranes of the horse's mouth. I'm not sure if you should put it on the wall or in the garbage. Just make sure it never gets in a horse's mouth again. This isn't a bad bit. Pretty nice bit overall. A lot of people ride. It's got a thick mouthpiece. When you put this in the horse's mouth, it goes this way, and it does lay too flat, but it's a nice thick mouthpiece, nice ratio here. It's a very lightweight bit. The problem I see with this bit is that if you want to work your horse laterally, do some bending, turning, circling, and softening, and that's how you need to work a horse to get him nice and soft, you can't do it in this bit. If you try to use this with a leading rein, which is what you need to do when you're working a horse laterally, what you're going to do is just bend this all out of shape in the horse's mouth. If your horse is just going down the trail, you've done your softening and suppling in another kind of bit, and you're just going down the trail and you want to do nothing but neck rein all day long, this can work. It's not a terrible bit. Not the best, but not bad. This bit has a port. The reason you have a port in a bit is because when the rider, the bit goes into the horse's mouth like this. It goes straight in. This port would lay back on the horse's tongue when the bit is at rest and the rider isn't giving him a cue. But as soon as the rider takes on the rein, the port comes up and hits the horse in the palate. The horse, in response to that, will flex and tuck. So it gives them a little bit more of a flex and tuck. Now, if you want your horse, if you're working your horse from the back end forward, and we've touched on that in some of the other videos in this series, and you want to collect your horse, a port is not a bad tool, but it needs to be used on a very well-developed horse. This particular port is not a good tool because it has solid mouthpiece and loose cheeks. I want you to learn how to look at bits and see what they do. Now, there'd be a number of people that would tell me that this was a really bad bit. Look at that big port. Well, it's not a bit that I would usually use on a horse, but there are rare exceptions. And this is not a bad bit. It has pinchless action in the center, independent action side to side, so you can use a leading rein if you want. Your horse won't get pinched. He'll respond nicely to that. You have a good ratio of purchase to lower shank. You have tongue relief. You see there's a nice arch there. There's plenty of room for the horse's tongue in this bit. Again, this will extend a little bit beyond the horse's lips so that fit isn't going to be a major issue. It's going to fit most kinds of horses. If you have a horse that is extraordinarily pacey and you've worked the horse for an extended period of time in the bit that we regularly suggest you use, rarely, very, very rarely, do you need anything else but our Imus Comfort Gate bit. But on occasion, you can go to this bit. This is a David Robart bit, and it's a ported curb, a very, very nicely designed bit. You can go to this bit, get that horse working, collect him up through the body, through the reins, and this will help him to collect up a bit more. And a horse that's pacey does better with a little more collection. Now, once you've got that horse working with good collection and moving in the gait you want him to go, and it's become established, take this bit, put it back in your tack trunk, because someday you may need it again, and it'd be a good, fine bit to use, and go back to the regular comfort gait bit. He doesn't need the bit forever, just until the gait has been established and his muscle memory is working to keep him in good form in a bit that's more comfortable. I'm not saying that this is a very comfortable bit, it's just not a cruel bit. Invariably, when I give a clinic at an expo on bits, people come up to me after the clinic and they'll offer me a bit that they have that they finally understand might not be perfect. And this is one of those bits. I was told it was sold as a gaited horse bit. It doesn't have a, I don't know who markets it or sells it or whatever. The problems with this are so obvious. I'm almost embarrassed, but I'm going to bring it up anyway because we're teaching you to look critically at bits. It has a 3-piece mouthpiece, so it's not going to have the nutcracker effect that some 2-piece mouthpieces would have, simple broken mouthpieces. The purchase and the lower shank are far too close together in length. Everything's going to grab hold all at one time. Not only that, but this purchase comes up so high that it almost certainly is going to interfere with the cartilage along the side of the horse's face. It's so similar in length that I have a hard time knowing which end is up and which end is down. Hang it on the wall. It actually is a pretty bit. This is another David Robart bit. And a lot of people would look at this and think it was really, really severe. It's not a bit that I go to very often. but when I need it, it's invaluable. And it's useful for a couple of different things. It's called a rafter bit, and this comes way, way back on the horse's tongue. When you put this in the horse's mouth, it goes like this. It doesn't have quite as much tongue relief as I would like, but that becomes a less critical issue when the bit lies that far back on the horse's tongue. When you take on the rein, this simply rolls over the horse's tongue. It doesn't come up and hit the horse in the palate because this bar doesn't come in and hold the bit in place. The whole bit simply rolls across the horse's tongue, and then this arch comes forward. So it rolls on the horse's tongue and the arch comes forward. What that does is encourages the horse to reach. It's the opposite of collecting the horse. It encourages him to reach for the bit. So if you have a horse that is extraordinarily trotty or diagonally oriented, this is a nice go-to bit in the extreme. You need first to work the horse out of a good bit, the Imus Comfort bit. You need to work them out of that first. But if you've done that and the horse is 4 or 5 years old and you haven't successfully brought him up into his gait as well as you would like because the horse is still too trotty, this can be a nice training bit for that purpose and that purpose alone. Again, you only use it for a period of time until the horse is become established in his gaits, muscle memory has become established, and then you put it away, go back to the regular bit, and you'll do just fine. Again, it's not painful bit, it's not the most comfortable bit in the world, but it's not a painful bit. Now there are a couple other times you might want to use this bit. We've used it successfully on horses who have scarred and damaged tongues. We've used it successfully on horses that just wouldn't accept another bit because they've had so much pain in their mouth where the bit normally lays. And it can be really a blessing in that regard as far as avoiding the areas of the tongue that have been damaged or that the horse is used to feeling pain in. Another thing we've used it for is, we can't do this on a horse that's pacey because it's going to increase the pace. But if we have a horse that's somewhat trotty and he has a real bad habit of getting his tongue over the bit, usually it's a horse that has a deeply rooted tongue and an overactive mind, and he's sort of playing games with his owner a lot of times. You can put this bit in and it lays so far back on the horse's tongue that he can't get his tongue over it. If any of you folks have any questions, why don't you ask them here? I'm accepting questions and answers because I know people watching the video are probably going to have the same questions. Lady in the black tank top?
I have both gaited and non-gaited horses. Can I use your comfort gait bit on both?
You can use our bit on both gaited and non-gaited. In fact, one of the problems we have with this bit is keeping up with production, because as soon as someone sees a horse in this and how well the horse behaves, they want one for their horse. And non-gaited horses work out of this bit just as beautifully as a gaited horse. Thanks for the question. Next.
Is there any way that this is legal in the show ring for those of us that want to use this bit? Because I know after the age of 4 we can't use the snaffle anymore. We have to go to a curb type bit.
Right. In most instances, we found that this has been legal in the show ring. We haven't come across any instances where it hasn't been, but I think it's always safe to check with show management beforehand.
What about a hackamore?
Good question. A lot of people think that going with a hackamore is the most humane way to ride a horse. Well, I'd like all of you folks and the folks watching this video to do a little experiment with me. Take your finger and press it against the soft cartilage on the side of your nose. Now do that several times on either side. Now I want you to do that half a dozen times in the next half hour. And what you find is that cartilage has become sensitized. It's painful. And that's the principle that a mechanical hackamore acts on. It pushes against that cartilage on the side of the horse's face, makes it sore, and so the horse turns in response to pain avoidance. Now, there are some people that can ride in a Basel, and there are certainly in some bitless bridles. There's certainly nothing wrong with a Basel or a bitless bridle. However, we have discovered there's not been a single time when people who come to our clinics who are riding in those devices switch over to our bits that they don't feel they get a much better response from their horse. Riding the horse in the right kind of bit really helps it to come up, collect up, come onto the bridle and into the rider's hand, and it sets up a much more intimate relationship between yourself and your horse. And that's really what most of us are after when we're riding a horse. We want an intimate relationship, and a good bit helps to establish that.
What is the difference between a hackamore and a bitless bridle?
A hackamore works off of pain avoidance. A bitless bridle works off of an indirect pressure, generally under the horse's chin. It can be a little confusing for them, but they do pick it up, and for simple directions and just hacking down the trail, it's fine. You won't get your horse as finished, in my estimation, in a bozal or a bitless bridle as you will in a good bit. Lady in the pink.
What age do you transition a horse from a snaffle into a curb?
Good question. What age you transition a horse from a snaffle into a curb? First of all, the kind of snaffle that you start your young horse in is very important. Now, we carry another Robart bit, and we happen to like it a lot for starting young horses. Young horse, you do start in a snaffle because it's direct pressure and it's not confusing to the horse. When you introduce a curb to a horse at too young an age, all of the various signals, the indirect pressure, can be very confusing for them. So we do like to work a horse in a snaffle for at least the first month or two of training until the horse has learned to balance itself well under the rider, is green broke, knows the cues for stopping, starting, turning, maybe a little bit of a rein back. But we showed how snaffles tend to pinch the center of the horse's mouth. Well, this Robart bit has a bushing in the center so that it avoids pinching. It also has some nice tongue relief there, so there's room for the horse's tongue. These are really important considerations. Now, we actually do start our horses in bits like this, and then after they're well green broke, we go ahead and transition them right over to our comfort gait bit. And what we do is we ride the horse off the snaffle ring for the first several rides, depending on how well the horse is doing and how well balanced he is and how well he's responding to cues and whether he can get up underneath himself well. Sometimes we'll only ride one ride and it seems like the horse is ready to go to the curb. Now, I would caution anyone from going to the curb shank too quickly on a very young horse. Do not put a curb of any kind into your 2-year-old's mouth. It's the mouth, like all of its membranes, any baby has tender membranes. And a baby horse, a 2-year-old horse is a baby horse, has a very tender tongue. And if you pull on this with leverage too hard, or the horse snaps its head up and you inadvertently pull back, you can actually cut the horse's tongue very, very easily. So you always want to keep a 2-year-old on a snaffle. Don't move any kind of 2-year-old out of the snaffle. If you're starting your horse as a 3-year-old, keep that in a snaffle until its tongue has gotten a little conditioned. It's going to get a little bit of toughness, just like us. If we go, it's not cruel to know that the horse's tongue is going to become a little tougher. It's like if we're going to walk barefoot, our feet are going to get a little tough, and that's a good thing. The baby horse's tongue needs to toughen up just a little bit to be able to handle the pressure of any kind of bit, particularly a bad bit. This bit will give the horse plenty of tongue relief, and we can take him from a snaffle to the snaffle on this bit, the snaffle rings on this bit, and then transition him when the horse is ready over to the curb. Usually, if a horse has been ridden in a snaffle for 2 or 3 months, at the age of 3 or 4, then you can go right to a curb and do just fine. Next question?
Can you use double reins?
You definitely can use double reins with this bit. Not with all, but with this bit you can, because when you want to have a snaffle action, you just take on the snaffle rein, and when you want to have a curb action for stopping or collecting the horse, you take on the curb rein. And that can be a nice way to transition the horse from a snaffle. Next.
Would that eliminate a full bridle then? You could use this in place of a full bridle?
You definitely can. Oh yes, you can use this in place of a full bridle and ride with double reins. You only need one bit in that too, right? Mm-hmm. Yes?
Do you need a curved strap on snaffle bits?
You do not need a curved strap on a snaffle bit because it's direct pressure from the rider's hand or from the rein. And so you don't need to have the curb strap or curb chain come up to ask the horse to tuck. It's simply direct pressure. Good question. So to recap what we've been talking about, the kind of bit that you're looking for your gaited horse, any kind of horse, but particularly for your gaited horse, which may have already been abused in bits in the past, and now it's our job to teach it to give itself comfortably and willingly to your hand. What you're looking for is a good curb bit that has a good ratio of the purchase to the lower shank. The purchase should be approximately 1/2 the length of the lower shank. You want to have independent side-to-side action on your bit so that you can work your horse laterally, but you need to make sure that there's no break in the center, that does not break down at all, that needs to be pinchless in the center of the bit. If your bit breaks down at all, it's going to pinch. You want to have a bit that's not going to pinch at the corners of the horse's mouth, and the way we do this is by extending that mouthpiece slightly beyond the horse's lips. You want to have a bit that offers your horse tongue relief, so there's plenty of room for that big fat pink tongue that all of our horses tend to have. You need to have a curved strap on the top ring of your curb bit in order for the bit to function correctly. All the features of our Comfort Gait bit. One of the most common questions we get is, how do I fit the bit to my horse's mouth properly? One common misconception is that people want to fit the bit so that there's 1 wrinkle or 2 wrinkles or 3 wrinkles at the corner of the horse's mouth. And they're always saying, well, I know it's right because I have 1 wrinkle or 2 wrinkles or 3 wrinkles. That is not the way to decide if a bit is fitting or how to fit the bit properly. The first thing you want to do is put the bit in the horse's mouth and then just take your fingers, touch the edge of the tongue, and the horse will roll its tongue back as far as it can. You want to make sure that the horse can't get its tongue up behind the bit. If it can't, and it's meeting the corner of the horse's mouth, that may be sufficient. However, some horses really prefer a little more contact at the corners. In that case, you can move it back up just a bit so you've got a little wrinkle there. Your horse's behavior is going to tell you more about whether the bit is fitted properly or not than any kind of static rule that someone might give you regarding how many wrinkles should be at the corner of the horse's mouth. Now, when you put your finger in and you check the horse's tongue, make sure it can't get its tongue behind it. Also double check, especially with geldings, that there aren't any wolf teeth that are interfering with the action of the mouthpiece. You want to make sure that, on our bit at least, that there's plenty of room, on any bit, that there's plenty of room so that there's no pinching here at the cheeks. Now this is a really big mare. She stands about 16.2, and you can see that our bit actually extends a little bit beyond her lips. That's by design. That eliminates pinching and makes for nice, smooth, swivel action, nice, easy response to the bit when you pull. Here we have a horse with very deep lips and a snake-like tongue, and he's able to get his tongue right over that bit no matter how hard you crank it up. And he likes to do so, often at his owner's expense. So what we're going to do is train him to keep his tongue nice and quiet, and we're going to do it in a very simple and humane fashion. For the horse that persistently plays with the bit until it gets its tongue over the top of it, we have a couple of really simple solutions. One works very well for horses that tend to be a little bit on diagonal trotty or else very racky, which Kelby is a very good racking horse. It's a dropped noseband. We install it on the horse like this so that it comes down below the bit and prevents him from being able to open his mouth. Now I would caution the viewer not to position it too low. and to make sure that it's snug enough, adjusted snugly enough here, that the horse can't open his mouth. Now we're not going to ride Kelby or have him ridden in this bit forever, or in this drop nose band forever. We're going to use it just long enough that he learns how to keep a nice quiet mouth while he's being ridden, and learns that he can't use his bit to, and playing with it with his tongue to distract himself and get out of the real work that he needs to do. Now if you have a horse that tends to be quite trotty, you can very successfully go to this bit. It's called the rafter bit, and it's really, really good for horses that are persistently getting their tongues over the bit. However, this bit is not for a very young horse. You would never use this bit on a 2-3-year-old horse. Maybe if your horse has, been ridden quite a bit and they're 4 or 5 years old, you can go to this. And what this bit does is it lays back far enough on the tongue that the horse can't possibly get his tongue over it. We're not going to install this because I think you can see the action. The other thing that it does is that it rolls forward. This does not go up and hit it's not a port. This does not go up and hit the horse's palate when the rider pulls on the rein. It just rolls over the tongue and goes forward, which causes the horse to want to reach for the bit, which causes them to go a little more level, causes them to stretch out, and will help a trotty horse to go more lateral. Sometimes they'll swing right over to a step pace, which is fine because then you can bring them right square and right back up to the middle. But this is another bit. You would only use this for a season until the horse has broken the habit of trying to get his tongue over the bit. But it works very successfully, especially for the diagonally oriented or trotty horse.